Hello, my name is Ozdemir, and I will present the paper Embodied Language Learning with Paired Variational Autoencoders. This research was conducted by me, Ozdemir, Matthias Kerzel, and Stefan Wemter at the University of Hamburg. The existing method by Yamada and others with standard autoencoders translates the robot action exactly into one particular description. Therefore, there is one-to-one mapping between a robot action and a description. However, the strict one-to-one mapping between robot actions and language descriptions is not natural or realistic because different words can be used to describe the same action, and the robot may receive various descriptions with the same meaning. So we can use alternative words to describe the same action. Therefore, one-to-many binding between action and language is necessary. For example, a description like push the red object fast can also be given as move up the red object quickly. Our task is robot action to description translation, and in our robotic scenario, two cubes of different colors are placed on a table at which our humanoid robot Nico is seated to interact with them. Given proprioceptive and visual input, our approach translates from action to language. That means we give joint angles and visual features extracted in advance to the system, and we expect it to produce the relevant descriptions. An example description can be given as slide red fast. Here, the first component describes the action type, the second is the color of the object, and the third is the speed at which the action is taken. The dataset we used is called Paired Action Language Dataset, and it consists of natural language descriptions such as push red slowly and their paired joint angles with egocentric images from Nico. In this dataset, we have 6 color alternatives for the cubes, which are red, green, blue, yellow, cyan, and purple. And originally, this vocabulary was composed of fewer words. You can see in this table, but we added an alternative word for each original word in this data set. So we have created alternative descriptions by replacing each word in the description with its alternative. So we have, for each action, we have 8 alternative descriptions. This is the architecture of the paired variational autoencoders model. At the top, you can see the language variational autoencoder, which takes as input the descriptions and is supposed to produce the same descriptions. At the bottom, you have the action variational encoder, and it is supposed to take as input the joint angles and the visual features, and it should reconstruct these joint angles at the decoder end. In the middle, we have the bottleneck, which aligns these different representations from these modalities by using binding loss. Binding loss is between the mean representations of language and the mean representations of action. Another thing is to notice that we are using variational autoencoders instead of standard autoencoders. So we use random sampling, which is also called reparameterization trick in the literature, to randomize the latent representations and to allow one-to-many mapping between action and language. So variational autoencoder for one-to-many translation. This means PVA associates each action with 8 description alternatives, thus provides one-to-many mapping by using stochastic gradient variation base, which is the core of variational autoencoder approach. After encoding, the encoded representations are used to extract latent representations by randomly sampling from a Gaussian distribution, and the binding loss brings the 2 VAEs closer by reducing the distance between the 2 latent variables, which are action and language. For visual feature extraction, we've used convolutional autoencoder method, And different from the original approach, we have used channel separation, which means instead of training a single instance of the convolutional AE, we trained red, green, and blue channels separately. And when extracting visual features, we concatenate those features extracted by different channels. Because this leads to a more accurate recognition of object colors, as the cubes cover only a small portion of the visual field. And the convolutional autoencoder is composed of convolution layers, a fully connected layer in the middle and the bottleneck, and the convolutional layers to regenerate the image. These are the loss functions, individual loss functions, which are used for training. For language, we use cross-entropy loss. For joint angular reconstruction, we use Euclidean loss between the predicted and the original joint values. And binding loss is composed of two parts. The first part here is to align those paired descriptions with actions, and the second part is to move apart those descriptions from irrelevant actions. And the total loss includes the reconstruction losses that we just saw, the binding loss, and the regularization losses, which are specific to variational autoencoders. And we use these hyperparameters to tune the loss function. So the model was trained with both variational autoencoders together, and visual features were extracted by the channel-separated convolutional autoencoder in advance. So we have conducted two experiments. The first experiment, we've used only 3 color alternatives for the cubes on the table. For the second, we've used 6 color alternatives. When we look at the results of the first experiment, the first row here, the PRAE plus regular CAE, is the original approach, which we compare our method against. And you can see that when translating from action to language, the original approach managed to get only 1/3 of the descriptions translated correctly, whilst when we used our variational autoencoder approach with visual feed extracted by the regular convolutional autoencoder, whilst PVAE with regular CAE managed to get 2/3 of the descriptions correctly. When we used paired variational autoencoder approach with our channel separation, we got up to 90% action to description translation accuracy. For the second experiment with 6 color alternatives, the original approach got a similar accuracy rate. When we used our PVAE with the regular visual feature extraction, we got up to 61% accuracy. However, when we used our variational autoencoder approach with our channel-separated convolutional autoencoder visual feature extraction approach, we correctly translated all of the descriptions from actions. So our contributions are: first, variational autoencoders facilitate better one-to-many action to description translation and address the linguistic ambiguity between an action and its probable descriptions. Second, channel separation and visual feature extraction leads to a more accurate recognition of object colors in cases such as ours, when the cubes only cover small portion of the visual field. In the future, we would like to make our scenario more complex by adding more cubes and different types of objects. We would also like to address the many-to-many association of action and language, which means a description can be interpreted differently and a different action can be executed depending on the context. We would also like to investigate the description to action translation, which is the opposite direction that we investigated in this work. And we would like to investigate this approach, this way of translation, both in simulation and the real world. Furthermore, we would like to extend the approach for the interpretation of more realistic, unconstrained language from human users. For instance, we would like to use pre-trained transformer-based language models to encode linguistic input. And this way, we hope to interpret unseen sentences that are semantically equivalent to training samples. So we would like to have our robot understand instructions from users, natural language instructions, without any constraints. Thank you for your attention.